So trend lines are a great tool to visualize the overall direction or trend in an asset. It's useful for spotting channels and certain chart patterns as well. Basically, the trend is that we see the market moving in a single direction, generally moving in a direction, either upwards or downwards. They're similar, these trend lines, I should say, are similar to support and resistance lines, but instead of flat horizontal lines, trend lines are made up of diagonal lines. Now, there's two types of trend lines. We see an uptrend line. These are drawn underneath the price action of an asset, connecting multiple low points to showcase those higher lows over time. So let's say the price is moving like this in this upward direction. Generally, we're seeing it move up. How can we illustrate this? Well, we can use a trend line to draw underneath the price action of the asset, connecting the lows to showcase higher lows. The lows are getting higher over time. Now, in a downtrend, we see the same, but in reverse. Downtrends are drawn above the price action of an asset, connecting multiple highs to showcase lower highs over time. So in this case, let's say price is moving like this, right, in this downward movement. Once again, price does not move in a straight line. It'll see peaks and valleys on the way up and on the way down. What we're really focusing on is the bigger picture and what direction are those peaks and valleys moving to. And in a downtrend, we see those highs getting lower over time, right? So each time the market is coming up or coming down, we're seeing lower highs, lower lows. In a trend line, in a downtrend line, we would place that above the candles or the line of the chart, and we would connect those highs to showcase the lower highs over time. One thing to note is that the more severe the slope of the line is, the stronger the overall trend is. So the more sloped it is, and the more it's not like a gradual slope, but if it's a really sharp slope, or that's a much more severe general trend. And once again, an uptrend will showcase a positive slope, whereas a downtrend will display a negative slope. Here's an example of an uptrend. This is the S&P 500. So this is actually arguably one of the greatest bull runs of all time. This was from from March 2020 to about really maybe January 2022. We'll have to see how this plays out. But generally, we could say confidently from this level that we were in an uptrend, right? Obviously, the market crashed in March 2020. We saw significant lows and then a general recovery. From about this point, we could have said, all right, at this point, we're starting to see these higher highs and higher lows, right? Generally, price is starting to just move upwards and continue to produce these higher highs and higher lows. It would seem like every other day the market was producing a new all-time high, especially from this point, from about September onward. It was just constant all-time highs. We could draw this trend line, this uptrend here, where we see generally the highs were getting higher, the highs on top, but the lows, these low points, were ascending as well. Now here's an example of a downtrend. This is linked to the US dollar. This is on the 4-hour chart. This is from November 2021 into late February 2022. General downtrend, right? Descending highs, descending lows. The highs are getting lower, the lows are getting lower. This really comes as part of the greater cryptocurrency downtrend in November into December and into 2022. And once again, all these altcoins such as Chainlink, Uniswap, Cardano, they're all tied to Bitcoin in the sense that if Bitcoin is diminishing, they will follow. So when it comes to drawing trend lines, we want to consider looking for trend lines with 3 or more touches, similar to support and resistance lines, right? Trend lines with 2 touches could be used, but can be considered not as significant. Touches should ideally be spread out, not clustered together, right? We want to see a gradual test of those lines. Think of them as those rounded tests. We want to see more rounded tests over time. And in an uptrend, you would draw low to low, showing higher lows over time. Whereas in a downtrend, you would draw high to high to high, showing lower highs over time. Now, typically, you could draw wick to wick, but body to body can work as well. That really depends on your preference. If you want to have take a much more conservative approach, you could use the body to body. The main thing is consistency. Consistency is key. Only go body to body or only go wick to wick. I personally, when using trend lines, I've only drawn them from wick to wick. I've never drawn them body to body. I mean, they work fine working body to body. I just prefer wick to wick. We also want to consider time frames. So the 1 day, the daily trend line is more significant versus a 30-minute trend line. All right, so we're going to draw a trend line. So here is Bitcoin to the US dollar on Coinbase. This is a daily chart. Here is Bitcoin from 2021 into 2022 and so on. Once again, if we're looking from the right to the left, we are currently here. We are in a pretty obvious downtrend, right? These descending highs. Let's see how we can draw this. So what we can do is we can go to our trend line icon over here. This first tab, we want to click on this arrow so see all our different trend line tools. Before we were using the horizontal line for support and resistance. What we're going to use now is the trend line. And what I'm looking for is to connect the high of a cycle. We can consider this a swing high. So we can click on here and we can connect this high to a lower high in regards to our downtrend, right? So let's say we drop this here. Now this is a pretty clean downtrend, right? We have multiple tests, 1, 2, arguably you could say this is 3, 4, 5, maybe even this is 6, maybe this is 7, and then obviously here. So this has been a significant downtrend. Now, going along with this, there was a break here at this point. There was a level of invalidation with this trend because as we see here, I'm just going to move this. There we go. Yeah. So as we came to this lower point into February, Bitcoin reached a new low, right? We're seeing these descending lows, lower highs, lower lows. We start to see a bit of a shift in the market and a break against this, where instead of producing yet another low at this point, Bitcoin actually came up and produced a higher high, followed by a higher low, right? So this is when we start to see, all right, this trend line isn't necessarily still valid at this point, right? So we can't necessarily still use this trend line on the present day to say, all right, we're still in this downtrend. Are we still in a greater downtrend? Possibly. But generally, even from what we're seeing, Bitcoin produced a higher high, right? A noticeably higher high, tried to produce a higher low, and then another higher high. This would have been a full-on reversal if we came to this particular part. Let me just turn this off. So if we came to around here and Bitcoin swung up, this would have been real indication of, hey, this is some sort of market reversal. But that didn't really happen, right? We came up and then was rejected, producing a lower high compared to the one here, and then ultimately fell down. What's interesting, though, at this particular point is that we produced another low at this point on February 24th. We have to see what happens in the future because we're really at a crucial point with Bitcoin here. And the low on this date, on January 24th, literally a month before, was 32,933. The low on February 24th, the next low, I should say, of this overall pattern was 34,322. So we're seeing about maybe like a $1,500 to a $2,000 difference. I can't do the math right now that quickly, but we're seeing a difference where this has produced a higher low compared to this one. So we have to see, and we have to wait for confirmation to see if this really truly is a higher low and where we go from here, right? To say, all right, is this trend considerably invalidated, or is it just extended? Maybe we just have to move the trend line, which is something that we could do. Maybe this is the more accurate trend line, and maybe we'll come up to here and then we'll be rejected. We'll have to wait and see for that. So here are some notes on trend lines. So prices may drop below an upward trend line or go below a downward trend line over a period of time. These situations do not necessarily mean that the overall trend has changed. Just like what we saw in the Bitcoin example, we have to wait for confirmation. We can't say that it was an actual reversal of the trend line because it failed to produce that higher high, right? It was rejected and then came back down again. So we'll have to see what exactly happens with Bitcoin in the short term. It's advised to treat them similarly to support and resistance levels. That means they're valid until a higher time frame candle close invalidates the trend. Now, once again, as with any other TA tool, trend lines shouldn't be relied on solely to determine what price will do at a given moment. You want to consider overall price action. Consider horizontal support and resistance levels. I find that they are conflicting. You might think that they are one and the same, where here's a trend line and here's just another line. They are two different things and they represent two different things. One represents supply and demand zones, buying zones, and selling zones and resistance, whereas trend lines I find are less about the actual line about themselves and more about suggesting the overall direction of the market. Right, we're looking at the big picture. So trend lines are more about that big picture, less about here's a place to buy and here's a place to sell. We also want to consider indicators as well, in addition to volume. Now, here's a special note. Typically, you want to prioritize horizontal support and resistance levels over diagonal trend lines when planning for significant levels of support and resistance to price. What do I mean by that? Well, I find that, and I find that most experts have it's a bit unstated in that support and resistance levels are more dominant compared to diagonal trend lines. Diagonal trend lines break much more frequently and are generally less significant when price nears it. Price does not respect trend lines as much as opposed to horizontal support and resistance lines, especially key higher time frame levels such as like 30K, 42K, maybe 53K in Bitcoin. These are key levels that price action respects, and you will see the difference when price nears it. And how it reacts in comparison to when price nears a horizontal trend, a diagonal trend line, which will be broken much more frequently, and the following reactions and the reaction of price as it nears it, when it meets the trend line and after it passes the trend line, is much less overstated compared to, and much less noticeable compared to horizontal levels and when they are met and broken. You You also don't want to force trend lines. It's not about the line, but what the overall shape of the market looks like. Finally, we'll wrap things up with measuring tools. So one of the more useful tools that TradingView offers is its measuring tools. The measuring tool allows users to measure distances on a chart in terms of price change, percentage change, the number of bars or candles, and the time starting and ending measurement. This could be in minutes, days, hours, etc. All you have to do is simply select the ruler icon on the right side of your screen, click on your starting point, and move your cursor, and we'll show you in a little bit. It's important and very useful and can save you some time trying to measure out candle heights and percentage changes on your own. So here we are back at our Bitcoin chart. What we're going to do is we're going to look for our measuring tool. So here is our measure. We're going to click on this ruler. And once again, I really like to have magnet mode. That way I can automatically snap to these top wicks, the bottom wicks, whatever. And I can start to measure out these moves, right? Like, all right, so let's say Bitcoin reached this recent high, this local high, swing high of about $45,855. This is on February 10th. Let's say from here, and to our lowest price, how big of a percentage change was that, and how long did it take? All right, I can click it again. Let's try that one more time. Here we go. And we can measure out exactly how long this took. So we see that this was a negative 25.15 percentage change. We see how many bars it took, 14 bars. In this case, it was 14 days. Remember, we're on the daily chart. And we also see the volume, the amount of volume transacted during this time. So that's a significant amount. We could also, instead of having the measuring tool where once you click and it disappears, you can also go to the date and time tool. So here you'll see on this particular icon, 1, 2 above the ruler. If you click on the arrow, you'll see this symbol that says prediction and measurement tools. If you go to date and price range, you could also just do date range if you want to do just the dates, or price range, just the price. I like to do both. If you click on date and price range, we can click. So let's say from the next swing high, this was 45.7, 44.7, and we can leave that, and we can click that in there, and now we can move the chart around and click anywhere we want, and this won't disappear. So I find that the measuring ruler is good for temporary, just quick examples. All right, I want to see how much of an example, how much of a drop was this? This is 13%. All right, and then if I click, it's gone. This is a much more permanent one. I mean, you can always delete these, right? But if you wanted to maybe take a screenshot for your friends or post it on Twitter, this is really what's advised to use. It's a lot cleaner, and you could customize these. As you can see, I have this with a yellow background. It's a little different than what you might be using if you're using the generic settings. But once again, you can just double click on it, and you'll see all these different settings for colors and the border, if you want to have a background, labels, etc.